You are watching Co-op for Two, broadcasting live from Champaign, Illinois, 3 p.m. in the afternoon, Sunday, October 15th, 2023. Today we are continuing our playthrough, read-through of Dear Holmes, the play-by-mail letter game. We're on our third letter here. If you'll remember the new Dear Holmes system, 3 letters explaining, walking us through the mystery. The 4th letter will be from Sherlock Holmes, or Watson, explaining the solution to the case. So this is our last letter, our last chance to figure things out. Last week we skipped playing the game so that I could do my 2.5-hour discussion of High and Low, the narrative detective mystery game set in New York City that I've been working on. If you haven't watched that video, maybe go back and give it a look. So we're caught up, and in fact, I do have the solution letter, which we're not going to read, but we'll read next week. I think it's good to be a little ahead of Dear Holmes, because sometimes they miss a letter, and this way we won't have to skip sessions that we don't want to. What else do we need to talk about before we get started? I think I might be available to play a game later tonight at 11 p.m. So we have to decide if so at some point, maybe on the Discord for this channel, we may figure out what game to play. We could play the new Deadbolt Mystery Society box, House of Asher, or we could play something else, or if it's inconvenient, maybe we won't do it at all. But if you want to be involved in deciding what games we play, you can either join the Discord, there's a link to it on the About page of the YouTube, or visit the Board Game Geek Guild for this channel, where we have a thread where we discuss all the possible games. And we are finally going to kick into gear for October. We've got a bunch of scary games to play, and I think I'll be streaming live most of this coming week, starting Monday, Tuesday, and so on. I think we'll either start with the Deadbolt Mystery Society game Sunday or Monday, and then we're going to start playing some more of the deluxe games. We're going to start with The Messenger, which is a creepy multimedia game that will take us several sessions. And then sometime around Halloween, I think the really deluxe one we're going to play is Root of All Evil, which is supposed to be quite creepy. So I hope you guys will join me for that. And then a few days ago, we played Curios Albrecht Manor, which was more of a story sort of art project game with some told in the form of letters. And not really a game, but a pretty cool story with a little bit of H.P. Lovecraft-esque type stuff. And but I think we'll be getting into some games in the next week or two. All right, let me just check in with the chat here. Joseph Mayu, who also has a subscription to Dear Holmes, says this is a good letter. If you, I'm curious, anyone else who actually watches these streams who has their own subscription, remember, don't tell us if you've read it ahead of time. But it's always fun to have those people join us for the discussions. One of the things that brings me the most joy on this channel is being able to discuss with people these games after we play them. All right, so since we missed last week, let's spend a little bit of time catching up. One more thing I wanted to mention. I've got my little mug here from the Puzzle People Facebook group. I am not a Facebook social media person. I really dislike everything about the social media stuff and Facebook. However, I was eventually convinced to check out this Puzzle People Facebook group. And there's lots of great recommendations on that group. There's the group involves a bunch of people who make these games, as well as some real aficionados. And they just opened their own Discord, which looks like it's probably going to be pretty active. Now, the puzzle games are not my favorite style of games, although we've been playing more of them over the last year. I prefer the Sherlock Holmes consulting detective crime dossiers, more reading of narrative. But it is a very useful group, and they do also some trading and selling of used games in this genre, which is also good too. But you may want to check out that Facebook group and their Discord if you have it. Okay, before we get started, Joseph Mayu says, total attention. I started playing Murders by Mail, the Birder case, and I watched the first stream today, and you're wearing the same bird shirt, so it's like deja vu. There's lots to talk about in those Murders by Mail. We played the 3 Murders by Mail games and really enjoyed them. And, you know, it's really interesting that occasionally you play a game and you don't realize that there are so few of them like this that it makes you sort of want to savor it a little bit more. And the Murders by Mail fell into that category. After we finished the 3 games they make, I really miss not having more play-by-mail mystery games. And it does make me think about, for my game, the idea of making it a serialized play-by-mail thing. There's something about the delay between responses that makes it a very different feeling experience. Last pitch for my game. It's being done in 2 parts. One are a campaign of cases, but the other are just the building blocks, the directories, and the maps. So if someone is interested in writing cases for my high and low game, the directories, the maps, all of the rules, the characters are all going to be open source, and I welcome people to make cases using it. And if someone is particularly interested in the play-by-mail format, there's no reason you couldn't use these building blocks to make a play-by-mail game. All right. And then there's another comment about the fact that I only wear 10 shirts in my whole life. But let's spend a little bit of time recapping this case. So the initial case was given to us. Mr. Brown is getting sick. His feet are getting numb. He's losing hair. He's walking strange. We visited him. Dr. Anstruther is Watson's friend, who Watson sent to diagnose the guy. We visited him, and we noticed he was using this talc. And we took a sample of it and a sample of his hair, and we were very suspicious right from the jump about this talc. His wife is also getting sick. Turns out the talc was a gift to the wife from Lady Elizabeth, the woman that the wife works for. And he uses the talc because he's got such a long walk. I don't know why it didn't occur to him that the talc could be causing trouble, since that's when it sort of started, but I guess there was a delay. At our last letter 2 weeks ago, Anstruther gets the confirmation from Watson that it is in fact the talc. The talc is full of thallium, which is causing thallium poisoning to the Mr. Brown and his wife. We're told here that the thallium probably comes from rat poison, sort of as an aside. I do want to come back to that in a second, because when I was rereading this, I made a note about this. They make a comment about how it's thallium poisoning, probably from rat poison, which has thallium. And then the woman repeats to us, you said thallium and sulfates. And I think at the time we brushed over this, but is it our understanding that the sulfates aren't in rat poison, and that there's something else weird about the fact that there are sulfates found? Are sulfates a poison? He says it's been laced with thallium sulfate. I see, thallium sulfate. So maybe it's just the one chemical, thallium sulfate. And so maybe she's misreading in here, thallium and sulfates, but maybe it's just thallium sulfate. But maybe this is something for us to pay attention to, if it may be a clue that it's not from rat poisoning, or that there's something else mixed in here that's a key to the source of this. This is when they find explosives, whatever. It's very common that you sort of do a deep dive into the materials to see if you can source where it came from. Anyway, so there's that. So we tell them, hey, don't use the talc anymore. They have a disagreement about Lady Elizabeth wouldn't poison us. And then there's a theory that the Browns have. Maybe it's the daughter, Emily. She's very rambunctious and science-oriented. Maybe the daughter was sort of experimenting as a prank or a trick and didn't really mean to hurt anyone. The husband says, I still think you should look into Flinders, this guy at work, because he keeps looking at my satchel, and I bring the talc to work in a satchel. The wife says, okay, you take the talc in the tin that Lady Elizabeth gave to me. Maybe you can clean it, disinfect it, and give it back. This was a key part of our insight when we were thinking about, our theory was, did someone try to poison Lady Elizabeth? And then Lady Elizabeth has passed on the talc unknowingly to Mrs. Brown. And one of the interesting things we came up with is the idea, like, has she given her the tin she bought? And if so, what would that mean? Did someone give it to her as a gift, pre-poisoned? And I think what we decided from this is that Lady Elizabeth has given the talc as a gift to Miss Brown in a custom tin, not in the store-bought tin. And I think that tells us something, that Lady Elizabeth probably just scooped her out some talc. Maybe Miss Brown remarked, I love the smell of your talc, and Lady Elizabeth gave her some from her supply. All right. So then we go, and Anstruther calls his friend who lives near Lady Elizabeth and calls to visit them. And we get a whole bunch of information now about Lady Elizabeth, which is quite fascinating. First of all, we're told that the previous lady of the house was Lady Sarah, and that she's died. She's died under some mysterious circumstances. We aren't told too much detail, but we know the husband has remarried to Lady Elizabeth, and his prior wife, Lady Sarah, died. And Lady Sarah was the mother of Emily and 2 boys. So Emily now and the 2 boys now have a stepmother, Lady Elizabeth. All right, we're told a little bit more about the 2 boys. One has got a good disposition, one doesn't. Emily is sort of, well, we're told about more later. Okay. Now, this couple that we're talking to, the neighbors of Lady Elizabeth and formerly Lady Sarah, tells us about James is brooding. Emily was just a baby at the time. The 2 boys look alike. They're twins. They're 4 years older. All right. Then we say, are they home? We're told the 2 boys are away at school. They come back every half term. Then we're told of a big dust-up that happened in the garden in December. Now, remember that we've got some dates about when Mr. Brown and Miss Brown started getting sick, and December is one of the dates where this stuff started. It's a little unclear, but that makes us think maybe this is related to the talc stuff when this started. Anyway, they were yelling. And then it was a few months after Sir William's marriage. So actually, I don't think we missed that last time, that he's newly married. In fact, he got married to Lady Elizabeth right around the time when this talc stuff all started. Okay, they heard the twins squabbling about their father. We're not told any more information. Then we bring this discussion back around to Emily. And we ask, we know the poison came from Lady Elizabeth, so we say, hey, have you seen Lady Elizabeth? Is she showing any signs of being poisoned, in trouble or anything? And he says, no, I don't think so. And then the wife kicks in and says, hey, she's been walking around on a cane. And we're told that she's indeed walking around on a cane, her gait affected recently. This is all the signs of the thallium poisoning. So it sure looks like Lady Elizabeth is also being poisoned. Also probably from using the talc. We say, has little Emily also looking like she's in trouble? No, she's running around having fun, playing hopscotch. So little Emily is not getting sick. And then we're told maybe another possible group of people that might be unhappy with Lady Elizabeth. She's involved in the women's movement, just like Lady Sarah, who's dead. Is it possible someone's trying to poison both of the women of the house for their involvement in the women's movement? His wife chimed in. There have been some incidents. Someone threw a brick through the house or something 6 months ago. Again, this is 6 months ago is in December around. So there's another set of occurrences happening back in December. And then another one more recently. So there was the brick. Oh, red paint. Not a brick. Red paint. And then a month ago, brick thrown through the window. Don't know what happened. Don't know who's doing this. Is it someone just upset at the women's movement? Is it someone upset at about the man of the house? We don't know. Okay. And then Christian is the son of our friends, the neighbors. Has Emily taken interest in Christian? Yes, she's peering over the garden fence. She's a very thoughtful child. She asks questions. She's very science-minded, very analytical. Okay, so we're sort of being made to suspect Emily a little bit. Emily's either going to be involved in this or she's going to be a good source of information for us since she's such a curious little girl. And then Ethel, our friend, the neighbor, says, I sense a great melancholy in her. Her mother's death was a tragedy. She's devoted to her schooling, sciences, interest in mineralogy. That's where we started to get a little bit suspicious about her and the thallium. Although if it comes from rat poisoning, it doesn't matter. Fungi. Her father lets her keep a sizable collection of mineral samples. We ask again about Lady Elizabeth. When she asks Emily about Lady Elizabeth, Emily suddenly gets uncomfortable. Her replies become curt, though she's always polite. And then she says, it's not too surprising. Because Emily probably misses her biological mother, so she may be a little distant to Lady Elizabeth. All right. So that's where we stand. Have I summed up the last letter well, or am I missing anything? Is there anything I'm forgetting? So we're being made to suspect little Emily. And someone came up with a very nice theory, though, in the channel. And that was that the husband has killed his first wife, Lady Sarah, via poison. And now he's trying to kill the new wife, Lady Elizabeth. So I think our suspicions on the father, on the husband, are quite strong because it would make a lot of sense that he's killed his two wives the same way. Anything I've missed, left out, anything anyone wants to add to that summary of our case? We did write, while I'm waiting for anyone to answer, we did write some questions here. Where did the talc come from and when? What is the thallium source? We think this is now rat poison, probably. Okay, can't read that. When did Lady Elizabeth's symptoms start? We think probably this is now December. How did Lady Sarah die? This is a big question for us. Did she also die of thallium poisoning? If so, that really pulls the suspicion to the husband and away from little Emily, who would have been just a tiny little girl at the time that Sarah died. Is anyone else using the talc? Should we search Emily's collection to see if she's got any thallium in her little kid's laboratory? Who is doing the incident? The red paint and the brick through the window. Who's responsible for that? What about the fight they had in the garden, the fracas, the garden fracas? And then when did Miss Brown get the talc? We're not told exactly when she got the talc. And I'm not sure what I've written here. This is your lesson about bad handwriting and notes. Don't go well together. I think it says, how was the relationship between Elizabeth and the family? And that was my note about the sulfates. Okay. Well, since there are no other comments being made in the chat, I think it's probably time for us to open our letter today. DJ Moneycut says, Miss Brown has been using it for many months and is still alive. Not very efficient way to kill someone. Well, it's true. That is a good point, actually. Though she's not using it much. Her husband's using it a bunch. You say it's not an efficient way to kill someone, but you can turn that on its head. There's a long history of people who are slowly poisoned, and there's some benefits to it, right? The fact that they die slowly from a gradual illness helps shift blame away from the culprit. And I think there must be some element to people who get poisoned their spouse slowly are also getting some enjoyment out of watching them suffer gradually. Veggie Dog says, I find it somewhat difficult to wrap my head around the idea of Lady Sarah dying of thallium poisoning. Surely the similarity in symptoms would be obvious to everyone involved. I think you have a good point there. I mean, if two wives die of the same symptoms, that would throw some real suspicions. Rob is being very nice and reminding me to remind you, if you like the content on this channel, please do give a thumbs up to these videos and subscribe to the channel. I do appreciate it. Okay, so let's take a look at our next letter. We've got 3 pages, so it's a long letter. All right, let's get started here. From Frederick Anstruther, Doctor of Medicine, Specialist in Unknown and Undiagnosed Illnesses, 17th of June. Our last letter was the 15th. Dear Mr. Watson, I am most pleased to hear that your aunt's fever has passed and that she is now on the mend. Grateful too am I to Mr. Holmes as well. Please let him know for the information on Sir William's first wife that you were able to supply, and for arranging my visit to the Harpers this morning. As instructed, I called on 221B Baker Street yesterday. Miss Hudson kindly led me to Mr. Holmes's extensive collection of newspaper clippings and allowed me to peruse the archive for nearly 2 hours. Although you had told me of Lady Sarah's general association with the women's movement, I had not been fully aware of the extent of her protests. Still, the clipping that most called my attention was one report of her death, dated 14 January 1888, so 2 years ago, recent. The piece was published in the Pall Mall Gazette, and it reports that on the day of Lady Sarah's tragic death, a demonstration took place outside the Houses of Parliament, where a crowd of women protesters were in full cry and most boisterous. It states that one of the horses, pulling a carriage belonging to an influential member of Parliament, bolted after becoming fearful when a placard was forcefully thrust in front of it. The beast reared up, and the carriage then careened into the crowd of protesters, crushing the life from Lady Sarah, not poisoned. Quite unplannable freak accident killed her. The account records that a thorough investigation of the incident was subsequently carried out by the Metropolitan Police. However, given the vast number of witnesses who had to be identified, traced, and then interviewed, it was expected to be an extraordinarily time-consuming task. It was completed, and the final report was made public, it seems nearly 8 months later. The Gazette published an article explaining as much on 7th of September of the same year. In addition to the expected practical constraints, some of the ladies, as one might understand, were quite elusive, if not reluctant, to come forward due to their standing in society. At the coroner's inquiry, the article claims 3 people, Miss Elizabeth Walters, Miss Ethel King, and Lady Sarah herself, were identified as having been standing closest to the carriage at the time of the occurrence. All were named in the coroner's report, but due to contradictory evidence, no direct blame was attached to any individual. In other words, it was unclear whose actions in the jostling crowd had frightened the horse. So our 3 people here are all people that we know. Elizabeth Walters is the new wife. Ethel King is the neighbor, our friend. And Lady Sarah is the one that was killed. Placard was put in front of a horse, bolted, and then the carriage killed her. Okay, further reading confirmed it was during those months between the death of Lady Sarah and the publication of the coroner's report that Sir William went on to marry Elizabeth Walters. This last bit of news, I confess, elicited a gasp from me and made the prospect of my meeting with the Harpers even more intriguing. My night and the morning today were restless with anticipation until I arrived once more in Upper Wimpole Street. It was 10:30 when I walked towards the front door of number 20. As I approached, I glanced briefly toward the facade of the house and observed that a thin figure moved quickly away from the front window upon seeing my gaze. Pulling upon a gleaming brass bell, it was only moments before an elegantly attired maid appeared at the door. I handed her my card and informed her that I was expected. She nodded, saying, "Yes, sir, this way, please." The interior of the house was surprisingly alike to that of the Fenwicks residence, but I would say that the Harpers' furnishings were even more opulent. As I entered the drawing room, a handsome man of middle years approached, with his hand outstretched. He said, looking down at me, "Good morning, Dr. Anstruther. I am indeed intrigued by the telegram that I received from Holmes, who is, it seems, on business in York. Won't you sit down?" I nodded, saying, "Thank you, Sir William," and perched myself in a rather sumptuous pale green Chesterfield. Only after sitting did I notice a bright-eyed but gaunt lady sitting across the room from me. Her legs were draped in a silk shawl, and her head was partly covered by a colorful patterned scarf. Beside her long reclining chair was a grand piano, against which was propped an ivory-handled cane. The lady made to rise, but I held out my hand and stood, saying, "Please, Lady Elizabeth, do not trouble yourself." She smiled briefly, then grimaced, as she settled herself back upon her seat. Sir William sat a little to one side and looked toward me expectantly. Gathering up my courage, I began thus. Sir William, I am here on a most delicate matter, which no doubt Mr. Holmes has alluded to in his telegram. It is the declining health of one of Dr. Watson's patients, a Mr. Ernest Brown, that has led me here today. As I said this, Lady Elizabeth's head jolted upright. I continued. Both Mr. Brown and his wife are grievously afflicted by a condition which, I believe, is also responsible for the apparent difficulty your wife has in walking. Sir William gave me a hard look before asking in a firm voice, I trust that this condition is not contagious, as we have not only ourselves to consider, but also Emily. The boys are, thank heaven, away at boarding school. I raised my hand with my palm outstretched, replying swiftly, I fear, Sir William, that it is not a contagion, but it is the result of contact with a specific agent, one that it appears only Lady Elizabeth has been exposed to. Sir William was silent for a moment before saying, almost to himself, an agent, you mean a poison. Lady Elizabeth broke her silence. You think I've been poisoned? How? And her husband continued, Is this related to this earnest fellow? I pursed my lips before replying, I can only answer part of this, Sir William, but I believe Lady Elizabeth may be able to shed some light upon events. I turned slightly in the Chesterfield before asking, Lady Elizabeth, I believe that you employ Mr. Brown's wife, Annie Brown, to clean for you. Oh, said Lady Elizabeth with a nod. Yes, doctor, she has done so twice a week for the past 2 years, but since March, was it? She started to complain that the task was most difficult due to her declining health, so she's only come Mondays. Recently, she announced her intention to resign. I nodded, saying, I'm sorry to hear. She must have been a valuable part of your staff. I understand from Mr. Brown that you were kind enough to give her a present on her birthday. Lady Elizabeth seemed pleased by the question. Oh, she said again, smiling. Yes, her birthday's in February. I gave her a small case of talc. I hope she has indeed been able to benefit from it. She paused. It was violet-scented, you see. Violet is a scent I cannot abide, as William well knows. Her husband nodded, saying, One thing you share in common with Emily. Yes, I learned my lesson together with the florist at our wedding. Turning to me, he rolled his eyes. I thought I was helping an old friend, told him, Big wedding, I need every flower you've got. He was nearly in tears when my dear Elizabeth, she gripped his hand, and he looked at her. Yes, well, when we sent back word that there should have been no violets in sight, the florist was quite upset. I thought all women loved violets. Lady Elizabeth gave his hand a playful slap. I should have said something before the wedding, but I'd no idea that the man's farm was half devoted to the ghastly flowers, and we paid him all the same. I prefer the scent of roses or just fruit. She gave Sir William a peck on the cheek. William brought me rose-scented bath salts that I very much enjoy, for example. These help with my legs, too, although the pain returns with a vengeance lately. As she rested her head on Sir William's shoulder, I questioned, Do you recall when the difficulty that you have with walking first manifested itself? Lady Elizabeth winced as she replied, I began to have a degree of discomfort in my joints, a little after Easter. Now it's difficult to walk unaided. Pain has steadily increased, as has the numbness in my fingers. I'm now at the point where I'm almost unable to play the piano. She sighed. Whenever Harry was at home, we would play duets together, and he would play for me for hours on end. I broached the topic of the powder a second time. The violet-scented powder that you gave to Mrs. Brown, did you keep any amount of it, or did you cease using it after giving her the gift? Lady Elizabeth made a face as if she had sensed something foul. Oh, no, I never used a speck of it. Unfortunately, I truly don't care for violets. I see, came my response almost involuntarily, as I knew that I could no longer withhold the truth from the Harpers. Well, I fear that the Browns have not benefited from your gift, Lady Elizabeth. The Browns? She asked immediately. Yes, in fact, I believe that your gift has been the cause of their current malaise. The talc inside it was adulterated with a poisonous substance. It was clear that both Sir William and Lady Elizabeth were stunned by my words. So I continued as amicably as I could. You were, Lady Elizabeth, it seems, the last. My statement was cut off by the sound of Sir William springing up from his chair and thereby launching it into the wall. You came here for this. We invite you into our home, and my wife tells you she is ill, and you, a doctor, respond with accusations. Lady Elizabeth sat in her leather chair, red in the face. I am not accusing you, Lady Elizabeth, or you, sir. I offered of anything. Nay, in fact, the Browns' symptoms mirror exactly those of your wife. They stared at me. I asked, Lady Elizabeth, how did you come by this tin of talc? She did not hesitate to answer, but she appeared to be troubled by my question and tapped at her own wrist. It was a present last Christmas. And do you recall who gave it to you? Her response was precise, but only served to complicate matters. Well, yes, but no, she answered. I know where and how I received it, just not quite who bought it for me. There is a tradition which my family is very fond of, and which I introduced to Sir William's family after we married. Sir William spoke. The children do enjoy it, though Emily won't admit it. Lady Elizabeth bobbed her head in agreement. Each person who participates must draw a name, the name of another person also participating, of course, for whom they are then to procure a gift. The fun is that everything must be done in secret. Nobody is to say whose name they drew, and everybody must endeavor to leave their presents wrapped so on the mantelpiece with just a label naming the recipient. I bowed my head. So the gift giver's identity is never revealed. Lady Elizabeth trembled, but maintained her composure. I'm afraid not. The powder was my gift last year, and I'd stored it away after unwrapping it until giving it to, poor Annie. She gently pressed a handkerchief to her eyes. Did any of the staff or anybody outside of the family participate in the tradition last year? I queried. No, it was just family. Me, William, the children, my mother, and William's parents. We purchased gifts for the staff too, though they don't partake in our game. I drew Emily's name last year, and William, she turned to him, well, you drew my mother's name, yes? He looked surprised. Indeed, dear. Lady Elizabeth smirked. Mother was convinced it was one of the boys, but I remembered having told you she fancied a new brooch when she last visited. Sir William cleared his throat and spoke. My mother gave James the peach-flavored sweets, I believe. She had written to us twice in the fall, raving about a neighbor's magnificent peach orchard. Her present, the one she received, that is, was a basket of sweets. Humbugs, sugar candy, and different sorts of sherbet. And my father, I can't actually recall what he received as a present. He turned to his wife. Oh, you gave Emily the mushroom books, and James got the sweets, but what did my father and Harry unwrap? Lady Elizabeth let out a as Sir William thought aloud. I received a pocket watch inscribed with small musical notes. Was that your mother? You never said. Oh, she was rather secretive last year and wouldn't let me have a peek. I've no idea, though I know the present fit in her purse. Lady Elizabeth straightened her back. Didn't Harry get a little musical box? Her husband considers this. That's right, the brass one. Neither could remember what Sir William's father had received. I understand this was some time ago, I said, but do you have any recollection of what the presents were left? What the presents were left? Do you have any recollection of when the presents were left out for their recipients last year, an hour or even just the time of day? Sir William recounted. Well, it's never easy with the children. I placed their grandmother's gift atop the mantelpiece close to 1 a.m. on Christmas Day. Then that's when I thought everyone was surely asleep. None of the other gifts had been left at that point, and I fell asleep shortly after returning to bed. I remember stirring again, perhaps a half hour later, when Elizabeth got up. She agreed. Yes, that is about when I left the gift for Emily. And when I left it, I saw the gift labeled Angelina for my mother, alongside yours, William. After I closed the door to our bedroom again and lay in bed, I heard tittering and a rush of tiny footsteps. I remember falling asleep quite pleased, some time after this, to the sound of the whispers and hushed laughter. I find it endearing that the children have taken to the tradition, at least somewhat. She shook her head and wiped a tear from her eye. We awoke later that morning at close to 6. The children were already sitting by the mantelpiece with their grandfather, presents still wrapped but in hand. Seeing the sadness in both she and Sir William's eyes, I addressed them both calmly. And your gift, the talcum powder? I must ask again, you are certain that you never came into contact with it? Lady Elizabeth was sure that she had not. I recall that when I unwrapped the pretty case and read the violet-scented label on it, I merely thanked my gift-giver aloud and quietly stored the present away. The case itself was wrapped with a lovely purple ribbon, tied quite roughly, I remember, but it was endearing. I gave it to Annie just like that. I'm embarrassed to admit, because I would have had to cut the ribbon off and find a new one. I understand. As for your symptoms, is there any possibility that you started experiencing anything earlier in the year? She sighed and swayed her head from side to side. That's what's most awful. I would have been taking care to eat well and take regular strolls this year. I have been taking care to eat well and take regular strolls this year. I was feeling amazing. I remember, William? Me in January? His head tilted in approval. Then all of a sudden, I started feeling strange at the end of April, and my legs started to hurt more. Now I'm hobbling around on a cane. Her husband moved to console her. I pointed out, well, it is a relief that Emily and your sons remain unaffected. Do they already have further study in mind when they leave at the end of term? And what of Emily's progress? Lady Elizabeth's face brightened. "Oh, Emily is enjoying all aspects of her education. Her school is indeed forward-looking, and although she may not be my greatest enthusiast, I am greatly pleased that the girls there are treated as proper students, not merely wives in training. William and I visited the school on open day. We were greatly impressed by their glass house and their modern laboratories. I often think I might have studied botany had I had the chance." Waving her hand towards the grand piano, she added, "And Harry is already an accomplished pianist, and in the autumn he is to go to Cambridge and continue his study of music. James intends to remain in London and study chemistry. According to Harry, James's room at his school already has something of the trappings of a laboratory with a microscope, scales, and other scientific ephemera in situ. He hopes to follow in the footsteps of his idols, Sir Humphrey Davy, William Crookes, and, I am most pleased to say, Emily Aston." Sir William now addressed me in a most serious tone. "What are we to do, Dr. Anstruther? My wife's health continues to deteriorate, and by implication, there appears to be a further source of poison at work within the house." Rising from their green Chesterfield, I turned directly to him, saying, "I ask that you trust in Dr. Watson and in myself, Sir William. Mr. Sherlock Holmes is lending his mind as well. We will untangle this mess." For a moment, Sir William and Lady Elizabeth seemed at ease. "I expect further communications from Watson in the morning, and I will keep you informed. Now you must forgive me as I take my leave. I shall write to him before later this evening." Sir William looked to his wife, then escorted me to the door. Before leaving, however, I made a final request in private. In light of the nature of our case and Emily's affinity for the sciences, I asked, as delicately as possible, if Sir William would allow me to inspect his daughter's room. He quietly agreed, as she was not at the house, and ushered me to her bedroom. He left me there for 3 or 4 minutes while I helped Lady Elizabeth to their chamber, and in that time I made one curious discovery. Atop a stack of books, most about fungi, was a small journal with crystal-like shapes, mushrooms, and flowers drawn on its cover. Emily Harper's diary. The entries were sparse, most comprising only a handful of sentences. So, with a great haste, I was able to find writing from both the week of last Christmas and the day of Sir William's marriage to Lady Elizabeth. I tore the 2 pages and will relay the relevant contents to you beneath this letter. My friend, I trust that what I have learned from the Harpers will enable you and Mr. Holmes to conclude this matter, and that my minor theft goes unnoticed, as I am beginning to fear that my own abilities are inadequate. As you know, should I come across any new information of note, I will write to you again, awaiting your word, Dr. Frederick Anstruther." And here are the notable diaries he ripped out. 22 September 1888. "Papa says I have to help with the wedding, with flowers and with decorating, and I have to taste the food, but not just the sweets, they said. Miss Elizabeth said I want lots of cheeses, and she had somebody bring foie gras to eat too. But it's not real grass, it's soft and gray." I think she's talking about foie gras. 23 September 1888. "Today is silly. I wish Harry and James were here. The flowers smell bad, and Miss Elizabeth thinks so too. She's crying about it, and Papa's angry, and Harry and James are away at school, and I'm supposed to wear a silly dress. I wanted to wear the one with the flowers." 22 December 1889. My present is better than everyone else's. It'll be just like the wedding, and Harry and James will get to see and laugh. I hope Nana got my name. Her presents are always good. Or James. He brought home the pretty blue bottles. Papa is no good at gifts. 23 December 1889. I don't like Harry or James anymore. They won't say who ruined my present, but I know they found it because it was supposed to have a nice red ribbon and now it's purple. Harry says he doesn't know what happened, and James keeps saying it was the ribbon fairy because she hates red. But I know there's no ribbon fairy, and red's a good gift color. Okay, so a nice long letter with a bunch of interesting stuff. The real shocker here for us is that Lady Elizabeth didn't use any of the talc. So she's being poisoned by something else. And that ending seemed to suggest what it was. Okay, so now we know Lady Elizabeth got the gift in a, what do they call it? Elephant, the something elephant, pink elephant gift system where everyone picks someone else's name at random. They give them a gift. So we're told about the miscellaneous who got what from whom. She swears she's never used the talc, and she handed over the tin just as she found it to Miss Brown with the purple ribbon on it, smelling of violets, which she hates. The husband knows she hates violets too. It seems to me that all of the interesting information is actually in those end diary entries. Somewhere we know, okay, so let's see. In September, on 22 December, my present is better than, okay, sorry, 23 September, the flowers smell bad. And Miss Elizabeth thinks so too. Okay, so Emily knows on 23 September that violets are bad. Smell bad. Elizabeth doesn't like them. Then in 22 December, she seems to be suggesting, she says, it'll be just like the wedding, and Harry and James will get to see and laugh. So it sounds like Emily has bought violet-scented talc on purpose to play a joke on Elizabeth. And then James brought blue bottles. We don't know what the significance of that is. Then she says that she doesn't like the brothers anymore. Why? They ruined her present. She knows they found it because it was supposed to have a red ribbon and now it's purple. So she thinks that the brothers have found her talc and opened it up and now have put a purple ribbon on it instead of a red ribbon. Now you might say, why would they do that? And Elizabeth tells us, she gives us a hint. She basically says the way this ribbon was, you wouldn't be able to reuse it for some reason. So she says, I wouldn't have opened it. I gave it to her just as it was, because if I had tried to take the ribbon off, I would have had to find a new ribbon. So the reason they've changed these ribbons is because they opened it up. She assumes it's Harry and James, but they won't say which one did it. But she gives us a little hint. Harry says he doesn't know what happened, but James says the ribbon fairy, because she hates red. So James knows what color ribbon used to be on that gift. So this really seems to be implicating James. Although maybe Emily is just not writing down the fact that she says, she could have said, hey, someone messed with my gift. It had a red ribbon. So I don't think this is guaranteed proof that it's James, but it sure sounds like James opened it up, put poison in the talc, and then re-wrapped it. Does anyone have, do we think this is reasonable that she says they won't say who ruined it? When she says ruined, she was doing it as a prank. She got Violet talc because she wanted to have she wanted to play a prank. So when she says who ruined it, presumably I'm reading that as just her saying, but why is the present ruined? That's the part I'm sort of struggling with a little bit. Because it sure sounds like she's saying she purposely is bought violet-smelling talc because she says, I can't wait till Harry and James gets to see it and laugh. Just like the wedding. So how is her present ruined? Or is she just saying that red's a good gift color, so when the ribbon was changed to purple, it was ruined? That's how I'm reading it. I'm reading her just complaining that they changed the ribbon, and she doesn't like that. It sure seems now like James is our culprit, and he's put the poison in the tin, not knowing. Remember, he wasn't there, so he doesn't know that she doesn't like Violet and wouldn't use it. And now he's poisoning her in a different way. Let me check with the chat and see what everyone thinks here. Emily knows she hates violets. We're the sons at the house for Easter. Emily gave the talc present, but one of her brothers opened it and added the poison. That's how I read it. But Lady Elizabeth needs to have been poisoned around Easter and didn't use the talc. Someone in the house carried out a second poisoning attempt. That's right. They don't know she isn't using the talc because she's polite about the gift. Is that true? I need to reread that. Maybe, and then DJ Monacut is saying what I'm saying. My theory about the ruined gift is just that the ribbon was messed up. Rob says, wouldn't the boys know that Elizabeth doesn't like violets, though? No, they don't know that. They don't know that. The first time anyone finds out is right near the planning of the wedding in 22 September is when everyone finds out that she doesn't like the smell of violets. So the boys, she says, I wish Harry and James were here. So the husband finds out she doesn't like violets. Emily finds out she doesn't like violets. The two boys don't find out. But that's okay. Emily still buys her violet talc because it's a prank. But the boys don't know that it's a prank, don't know that she's not going to use it. They think she's going to use it. James brought the pretty blue bottles brought home. I think the pretty blue bottles are the thallium poisoning. And sulfates. Do we have any suspicion that the sulfates or the thallium would be blue? I think these might be the poisons or the chemicals that he's brought home. Okay, so the boys don't know that it's a prank. They think she's going to be using the talc, so James poisons it to kill his stepmother. Now, somewhere between December and now, James must be finding another way to poison her. We're told when they come home. Let me remind you. Where is our letter? Okay, so look. Michaelmas, Lent, and summer. Isn't Lent Easter? Isn't this when her symptoms started? When is Lent? Is this not around Easter? April? And then the fracas in December might have been, that's when they came for the gifts. Okay, so the kids were home in Easter when the second sickness starts, or when the more recent sickness starts, because they come home every Easter. Now let's see if we can't pick out anything more about James that would give us any clue. Let's see. You think I've been poisoned? How? Okay. February, birthdays in February. That was one of our questions. I gave her the talc. So she's been keeping it since December. It's February. She didn't use any of it though. Okay, no violence. We know all about that. I prefer the scent of roses or just fruit. William bought me rose-scented bath salt. Yeah, I think it's very possible that James came home during Easter and added the poison to her bath salts, as someone in the channel points out. Moneycut says we need to test those rose-scented bath salts. Joseph Mayu says, my theory is James is upset about what happened to his mother, blamed the new wife. Having noted history of acting out emotionally, he devised a plan to poison the talc. Brother caught him, hence the quarrel during Christmas. He returns the following Easter and poisons the bath salt. That sounds right to me, although I don't know about the brother catching him. That seems like that might be some extra theory that I don't know we have evidence for. Okay, she doesn't say when she started using the bath salts, but it doesn't really, not really relevant for her as long as James came home for Easter and added it to them. Okay, when did it start? Easter. Yeah, there we go. Started after Easter. That's when the boys visited. Okay, so that's it now. The boys have come home, and in Easter, they've poisoned her bath salts, and now she starts getting sick. Whenever Harry's at home, we would play duets together, and he would play for me on hours on end. So it sounds like Harry, the boy Harry, is actually friendly to her. It's James that's troublesome. All right. You can probably hear that music in the background from the park. Okay, so I think we've solved this mystery. Let me just see if there's anything else of detail about James. Let's see if we can catch any more information. They do the thing. Okay. So that we get to hear a little bit more about who's getting gifts for who. Husband gave to the mother. My mother gives James the sweets. James got the sweets. Who gave my father? We don't know. Didn't Harry get a musical box? The brass one. And then we're told that they were put out a little bit ahead of time. I guess we could try to see this to see if who had time to get to Emily's present, but we already know that someone did and changed the ribbon. Then she heard someone get to the presents early in the morning with some laughter. Purple ribbon, which we know was a replacement. We don't know where the purple ribbon came from. Here's her comment about how if you take off the if you take off the original red ribbon, it would get damaged, so you'd have to replace it. That's how we know it got replaced and why. End of April, again, that's when her sickness started. And we're told a little bit more about the kids. She's happy Emily's going to get a good science education. Harry's already an accomplished pianist. James, according to Harry, James's room at his school already has something of the trappings of a laboratory with microscope. So James is the chemist. He wants to follow in the footsteps of his idols. Now, do we have any history of any of these idols involving poison? That might be another little clue that it's James. If there is some history of poisoning with Humphrey Davy, who's a famous scientist. William Crookes, I don't know. Emily Aston, I don't know. All right, looking for any more little clues about James here. All right, finds the diary. Confirmation that the boys weren't there when they learned that she doesn't like Violet. Confirmation James has brought home blue bottles that could be the chemicals. And then confirmation that the boys did something, we think, because James is the only one who knew it had he seems to know it had a red ribbon, which really strongly suggests that James, Harry doesn't know what they're talking about. Okay, so I think that's that. Let's check in with the chat. Then I'm going to read a little bit more about James's history in our previous letter. The clincher that it's James and not Harry might be that at this time the agent turns out to be pure thallium, not the sulfate, which is more of a specialized chemist thing. That's a clever, or maybe that it's not even thallium anymore. Macon is saying that when we find out and analyze the bath salts, we might get information that it's not rat poison, and then the only person who had access to chemistry would be James, so that would help lock him in. Emmy says, everyone seems very relaxed about the seemingly ongoing poisoning of Lady Elizabeth. I'd be getting everything tested. It's true. Our guy seems to tell them, just keep going about your business. Don't change anything. I'll get back to you. If I was that woman, I'd be like, everything out of this house. Joseph Mayhew has a theory about the quarrel during the previous Easter. I don't know if I would jump to that conclusion. But let us look at the previous letter where we're told about James and Harry, just to see if there's any more interesting clues. Let's So this is our previous letter. Okay. Whilst Emily is home, the twin boys, Harry and James, are away in their final year at school. They took her passing very badly, James particularly so. It was a bad business. The events surrounding her death were never fully resolved. The twins look like each other, but their temperaments. Harry is demonstrative, passionate. Perhaps it is his musical bent that makes him so. And they played duets with Elizabeth, so he has a good bond with Elizabeth. Not James, though. James can be brooding. Then he bears a grudge. Look, they're talking. She says, here's a little story. When they were 4, they were playing. A guy came and took away their stick swords. And then she remembers Harry got over it, not James. He was sullen and bore a grudge for a long time. And I think someone pointed out, which was a very good, clever observation, that when I read the story about how Miss Sarah originally was killed, I said it's a freak accident. No one could have arranged it. That's absolutely true. But what we are basically told is that they did a big investigation. Like, what exactly happened that made this horse run out of control and tip the carriage and kill Lady Sarah? And we're told that someone held up a placard to spook the horse, and that perhaps these 3 women were involved in somehow, were near, maybe one of them actually caused it, not on purpose. And Elizabeth Walters is one of them. So it's very possible that James was like, this woman is to blame. She was right there. I read the report. Like, I followed it, and yet it was inconclusive. No one could be to blame, but I think that Lady Elizabeth was holding up a placard, and maybe she's responsible for spooking the horse. So it's not just that he doesn't like that someone is taking over his mother's role, which is Lady Elizabeth, so soon after Lady Sarah died, but he may actually blame her for her death. It was unclear whose actions jostling crowd had frightened the horse. Yeah. Is there any clue that James is actually doing the brick and the paint? When did those happen? I wonder if those aren't going to be times when the brothers are at home. Let's just see that. We asked about the incidents at the house. I want to see if the incidents are in fact... Okay, so the first one was 6 months ago. That's December, possibly when the boys are home. Red paint was thrown against the front door. And the second one was a month ago. That doesn't quite match when the boys are home. So maybe this is just unrelated anger at the women's movement stuff. All right, so maybe unrelated. Neighbor does mention the park incident with the brothers, lends more towards James as the violent one. Violent and bears a grudge. Yeah, okay, so I think... Look at what DJ Moneycut says. So I speculated that we're told James's heroes are his idols are Humphrey Davy, William Crooks, and Emily Aston. And I speculated that if one of James's idol has a history of poisoning, that would be another reason to suspect him. And look what Moneycut has written in the channel. Crooks discovered thallium. Crooks discovered thallium. I mean, so if Crooks is one of his idols in chemistry, and there's a connection to thallium, that is really locking that in. All right, well, I think we basically got this case wrapped up. That was a very cool, surprising twist letter, that she's not being poisoned from the talc. Pretty nice. And little details about James makes it make sense. Do we have it all wrapped up? Any objection? Anyone think there's anything that we don't understand? I'm looking at my questions. I think we've got it. What were the original questions? Yeah, that's a good point. What were the original questions that Watson charged us with? 1. How or when did he first fall ill, Mr. Brown? The answer to this could be the key to protecting others. All right, well, we know she got it from on her birthday, which was in February birthday. She received the talc. We know the talc is causing the poisoning. It started when she first started using the talc. Disregarding the nature, could someone have transmitted or perhaps inflicted it upon Mr. Brown? If so, was a deliberate act. All right, so we know, I mean, these questions are not actually all that useful for us, having solved the case. Veggie Dunk says, I'm not 100% sure about the second incident and the boys being home or not. They are home at the end of each term, but are also home midterm, whatever that means. Seems they're home a lot. If we're talking about the red paint and the brick, I guess it's not important. And also, it doesn't match James's goals. James' goal is to punish and kill her, not to sort of scare her and make it think like people are after her. So if you had to guess, I think the guess would be that James is not the one putting paint on the door and a brick through the window. That's not what he's after. He's trying to quietly kill her while he's away so he won't get blamed. He's bearing a grudge. He's trying to get his revenge on her. Joseph says neighbor, coworker, women's movement, all red herrings. Yes, I think that's right. And we all think it's the bath salts that are poisoning her. We don't have any affirmative evidence about that, but we absolutely have affirmative evidence, or we absolutely have circumstantial evidence that James has come home in Easter and been like, okay, turns out she's not using the talc. I'll just poison her a different way. And he started poisoning probably her bath salts, which started after he came home for Easter. And she does say that she uses it. It makes her legs feel a little bit better. Probably it numbs them. And then it kicks in again. So I think we do have some circumstantial evidence that it is the rose smelling bath salts. And maybe he's putting it in powdery stuff. So it absolutely makes sense. All right, I think we've got this case locked up. Pretty cool ending letter, I have to agree with Joseph. Anything else, anyone? I guess we don't need to discuss this to death, because next week we're going to discuss it a little more and open the letter and get the final solution. So we might as well stop here. If you want to help decide what I play later tonight, you could hop on the Discord or on the Board Game Geek Guild for the channel. Does anyone want to speak up now? Does anyone going to be here at 11 p.m. have a particular preference about playing Deadbolt Mystery Society House of Asher or something else? We could play, another alternative would be to play one of the boxes from a different company we haven't played yet, like the Conundrum box, or we could play a different Deadbolt Mystery Society box that we've been planning on playing for Halloween. All right, we don't have to discuss it now over YouTube. We'll discuss it in Discord where we can have a actual back and forth discussion. All right, thank you everyone for joining me. Fun case. I'm looking forward to the solution, although I think we've got it wrapped up now. What's going to happen to James? He hasn't actually killed anyone. So probably, although he's old enough to be studying chemistry, I don't know what's going to happen to him. Probably he'll go to some youth home. And it feels like Lady Elizabeth is going to forgive him. We'll see next week.